Welcome to the Edge Lab, the response media podcast where marketing meets data and behavioral science. Join us as we explore bold strategies and actionable tactics designed to drive results and redefine the future of brand growth. Meet our hosts, Ami Sirlin, Response Media's Chief Client Officer, and Alvin Glay, Chief Strategy Officer.
Thanks for joining us today as we dive into the exciting world of marketing and the CPG space. I'm Ami Sirlin, the Chief Client Officer for Response Media, and I'm thrilled to be your host for this knowledge pack session. Mastering metrics, the key to unlocking the power of first-party data, growth for CRM programs and CPG success. In the fast-paced world of consumer packaged goods, leveraging first-party data and CRM programs is like having a secret sauce for turbocharging growth and creating meaningful connections with your customers. Together, we're going to uncover the mysteries of measuring the effectiveness of these strategies so you can confidently make those investment decisions like a pro. Today's webinar is your ticket to valuable insights, actionable strategies, and practical tips straight from the industry experts who've been there and done that. By the end of the session, you're going to be a metrics master, equipped to measure the success of your first-party data initiatives while wowing your customers and building unwavering brand loyalty. So let me introduce our guest speakers today. Let's start with Christine Foster. She is the Vice President of Media Operations at Kroger Precision Marketing, and with 15 years of media strategy, content creation, and digital marketing, Christine leads a top-tier team aligning business strategy with performance marketing using machine learning and audience data science. She's excelled at Goodway Group, McClatchy's, AOL Patch, and more, contributing to industry boards while based in Atlanta with her husband and 3 children. Next, we've got Michael Lafayette, VP of Brand Development for Independent Grocers Alliance, or IGA. Having shaped iconic brands like Powerade, My Coke Rewards, and USA Today, Michael's data-driven approach uncovers consumer motivations. Formerly at Coca-Cola, he's now at IGA fostering CPG partnerships, teaching at Georgia State University, and also lives in Atlanta with his wife and 2 children. Moving on to Ricky Busby, Director of Data-Driven Marketing at Georgia Pacific Consumer Products. He leads data activation for brands like Angel Soft and Brawny. By leveraging data for personalized experiences, he's a brand manager and a digital marketer expert who loves running and the outdoors. He resides in Atlanta with his wife and 4 children. So finally, we're joined by Dr. Alvin Glay, VP of Data Science and Analytics at Response Media. With nearly 2 decades of data-driven growth marketing expertise, he's elevated brands like Procter & Gamble and Verizon. Beyond his professional achievements, Dr. Glay has also founded an educational initiative in Liberia. He too resides in Atlanta with his family. So we're excited to have each of you joining us today, and thank you in advance for your time as we explore the world of digital marketing and its impact on the CPG space. So quickly though, before we dig in, let's just do a quick CPG refresher. CPG is consumer packaged goods, and it's all about the everyday products that you use and love. CPG products are an integral part of your daily life, from your favorite snacks and beverages to your personal care items and household essentials. In this diverse and competitive space, you'll find industry giants like Procter & Gamble, Nestle, and Unilever, who've been shaping the market for decades. But it doesn't stop there. Innovative newcomers like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods are revolutionizing how we eat. So whether you're a savvy consumer or a potential player in the game, CPG is a vibrant world that caters to everyone's everyday needs. So with that, let's go ahead and get going. Start with a statistic. Last year, Boston Consulting Group released a study that found brands using first-party data for key marketing functions achieved up to 2.9 times the revenue lift and 1.5 times the increase in cost savings. Question: can you provide examples of successful CPG brands that have leveraged first-party data and CRM programs to drive significant growth in consumer engagement, and what lessons can be learned? Christine, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, at Kroger, we have over 2,000 brands that work within our retail media network. And I would say that the the real reason and kind of the way that we work is leveraging our loyalty program to serve consumers with inspiring messages. I would say that, we're distinct from traditional media because we can't just be successful by selling impressions. We're really focused on personalization. And I think the most successful brands that work within retail media are looking to personalize the messages for their audiences, making shopping easier.
Yeah, it's all about making shopping easier. I love that. Michael, how about you? How about from an IGA perspective?
Yeah, I'll actually take a few steps back because you asked about successful CPG brands, and obviously IGA, as Christine talked about with Kroger Precision Marketing, works with a lot of CPG brands. But take a way step back. A program I worked on at Coca-Cola 15 plus years ago, My Coke Rewards, was really to some extent the genesis. And I like to joke it was first party data before we called it first party data.
Before it was cool.
Right, before it was cool. I'm often accused of being before everything was cool myself, so it works out well. But in terms of My Coke Rewards, we had 25 million members registered, and as a result of that first-party data, we were able to do a whole bunch of different things that maybe we'll talk about later on. But I think the industry has shifted to understanding of the value of first-party data. And since you asked sort of what made that program successful at a very high level, I'd say it was a consistent strategy and dedication to going after relationships with consumers and shoppers. So it wasn't a one-off, hey, we tried it, didn't work, whatever. It was a strategy that came down throughout the organization to be successful versus, well, we're going to put CRM or first-party data over here, and then we're going to run our business. It was integral to the business. It was consistent. It was something that was focused on.
Great. Ricky?
When I think about CPG brands that have done it well, in my mind, over the last 5 to 10 years, I think about the D2C and just the transition that we saw with startups and that shift to selling direct in the way that personal care brands, Dollar Shave Club early on, but even more recently, Harry's, Native, and others who built that first-party database. They built that consumer connection, and they scaled not just in their online business, but as that kind of transitioned into kind of a brick and mortar presence where they're able to kind of take that data, sort of like what Michael said, and kind of grow upon that. And so where they were able to learn what their consumers valued, who they were, and how to build that brand and that story around it.
It's great. Thank you. Alvin?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what everyone said, if you to think about it for Ricky, so the fundamental challenge in the consumer packaged goods is that direct to consumer relationship, right? So understanding who they are, what they're buying, and how they're engaging with the brand. And first party data allows them to understand who they are, what they're doing, and how they're engaging with the brand, right? So that helps build the connection. So because of CPG, the fragmentation and the point of purchase, there's no data ownership. So as a brand, building that relationship through the first party, so now you can understand, who's Alvin Glaze. You can understand what is he buying, his consumption behavior, his switching behavior, and that allows you to then build that relationship. Going back to your stats, as you talk about, that increases marketing performance as far as 2x. If you really look at overall media and marketing, there are really 3 components of that in terms of what goes into the cost, right? So there's data costs. That's number one. There's technology costs, and there's placement of inventory. So first party data helps remove some of that component from the cost, and those usually represent 25 to 50% of that cost. So when you look at it at a higher level, this is the reason why, as a CPG brand, leveraging first party data allows you to be effective in your marketing strategy. So when I think about brands who are doing it well, as far as some of the clients we work with, Mucinex, right? We're able to drive a household penetration because now we understand what's in the household. We're able to increase purchase frequency. We're able to protect share, right? To understand if they're losing share to other competitive brands. And because of first party data, we're able to do that.
Yeah. It is so interesting to have been in the industry, be surprised, as long as I have. Being able to watch that connection, Michael, to your point, 15 years ago with My Coke Rewards, seeing the adoption rate of that one-to-one consumer connection has just been, for me personally, very exciting. And the places that we'll go, it's really, it's a great time to be a part of the industry. Very good. So moving on, according to a 2022 survey by Matter Communications, 31.4% of the US CMOs and senior executives have said their biggest marketing challenge this year would be performance measurement and putting it on par with economic uncertainty and driving qualified leads. It's a lot. So from your perspectives, what are the common challenges or pitfalls that CPG brands encounter when implementing and measuring first-party data growth in their CRM programs? And how can you overcome them? So, Ricky, how about you kick us off?
Sure. I think there's two that we're, we have thought about in our experiences, sort of time and scale. So in the time, how long is this going to take to be able to get to a scale, to be able to measure, to get the returns, the data back, to be able to see, is this performing, to make the optimizations, not just in the open and the clicks, but in the longer term relationship building. And then building that scale. How long is it going to take you? Do you want to go quickly grow that list and that database of consumers that you have? And how are you going to do that in a balancing quantity and quality of those leads? And so from a kind of challenges, both in terms of time to deliver, and then also kind of what is that right scale and how to find the right balance between that quantity versus quality when it comes to database growth.
No. Alvin?
Yeah, I mean, so to piggyback on what I was saying in the prior question is about that closed loop measurement strategy to understand impact, right? So you have a fragmented point of sale distribution. So let's say you're a Procter & Gamble, you're working with the Krogers, you're working with the Publix, you're working with a lot of different retail distribution, and it's all about data ownership, right? So who owns that data? So you have a gap there. And then the other piece is around understanding, those engagement metrics. So when we think about building first-party data strategy and the challenges that CPG brand face and how to measure effectiveness of a 1PD, that's the core challenge for us, is that closed loop measurement impact, right? So the way we look at it, there are interim steps you can take to understand, is this working? Is this driving the results that I want to, which is, am I driving new buyers? Am I protecting my share? Am I reducing churn or competitive switching? 1PD is the first place to start, right? So it allows you to understand action. And then when you're doing that, you also want to allow your customer to experience that same D2C experience where they can buy. So for example, if you're doing offers solutions, that you want to allow retail agnostic, where you can then track the redemption of those offers, right? And then how do you get that data back? So some of the challenges that we see is then in the couponing space too, right? In the space traditionally today is all print at home, right? So you have to take paper coupons to different retailers, and with that, there are a lot of fraud. The other piece is then understanding the impact of that. So the way we look at it is, how do we bridge interim step to solve those challenges? So for example, we work with Mucinex and created the first category, retail agnostic mobile couponing solution that now allows a consumer to go to any store and buy a product. So instead of waiting 80, 90 days to get redemption data, we can get it in real time, right? So you can then communicate with that consumer and then see, hey, you have a coupon, you haven't saved it, you can move forward from there. And then also there are retail apps like, the Kroger, the Ibotta's of the world, that loyalty platforms that have transaction data where you can have receipt scanning capabilities and get that data back. that you can understand loyalty. And then one of the things that we do as well, because of the first party data aspect of it for the brands we work with, we do a longitudinal study, right? So if you come in, we understand where you are, your preference, the product that you buy, your purchase frequency, all those key metrics. And then we're able to understand over time, are we changing behavior? So because there are challenges in measurement, but there are interim steps that CPG brands can take, such as longitudinal study, mobile couponing, that allows you to build that direct-to-consumer relationship that you can now understand, the full impact of the program.
Love that. How about for you, Christine?
Yeah, I think Alvin and Ricky, you guys both hit the nail on the head. Time and scale are critical, but there are interim steps to take in both of those cases. CRM is a long burn. I think that's probably a big part of why retail media has come online, right? Which is to help bridge that scale gap that you mentioned, Ricky. It's difficult for brands in low engagement categories to drive that opt-in. I don't necessarily have a relationship with every pickle jar in my pantry, right? You're not going to necessarily, that is more difficult. That is a longer burn. But there are those interim steps where, retailers like IGA, like Kroger, can step in and help bridge that gap. I mentioned it earlier, but our loyalty program has been that space for our customers for, more than 20 years. And that really helps brands scale and kind of overcome some of those challenges more effectively in reaching those with their consumers with personalized messages.
Yeah, makes a huge difference. Michael?
Yeah, so I'll take a slightly different tact on this, but agree with what Ricky said about relationships, time and scale. Definitely agree with what Christine said in terms of partnerships and sort of accelerating it beyond silos. And I have a relationship with every pickle jar in the store. But I think the two biggest challenges are actually organizational. So one, I think nomenclature gets in the way. Christine said CRM is a long burn. She's accurate, but it's not CRM. It's the relationship with your customer, with your shopper, your guest, your consumer. And what Ricky said, it's about building a relationship. So you might go to somebody, hey, you want to launch a CRM program? They go, maybe not. Do you want to build first party data? Well, I don't know what that is. Do you want a better relationship with the people who are handing you cash? Everyone's going to say yes to that. So I think we get, as an industry, in our own way a lot with nomenclature of calling things different. Do you want to do an email program? You want to do this? No. Do you want a better relationship with the person who's going to open up their wallet and hand you a check, credit card, cash, etc.? And then I think the other barrier is really change management and organizational behavior in terms of today's way of marketing. So I'm a graduate instructor at Georgia State University teaching MBA and Master of Science students. And one of the things I tell them on day one is, hey, listen, I'm old. I didn't have to learn data-driven marketing. I didn't have to learn digital marketing. I could retire and probably not ever touch it. They don't have that luxury because this is the way marketing is done today. And there are still a lot of people within organizations who don't understand the value of having closer relationships with their shoppers and using data-driven marketing to make that happen. And I think a broader understanding of how it can really impact a retailer, a CPG, a DTC brand, that's how you move the business today. And so you have to really understand that and get out of the way in terms of change management, because it's here to stay.
Yeah. You stumped me for a second because I'm not sure which is better, having grown up without it or having the ability to work within it. I don't know. Yeah. Those kids today are pretty lucky. So switching gears very slightly, we're going to move to stats at this point. So according to Gartner, 80% of our marketers struggle to identify a common set of metrics to measure multi-channel marketing effectiveness successfully. I think we all struggle with that. So question, what are the key metrics that CPG brands should focus on when evaluating performance of their first-party data and CRM strategies? Michael, kick us off with this one.
Yeah, so I would say the common set of metrics, going back to my last answer, should be different than the common set of metrics for your business. That being said, right, so at a very high level, right, sales performance, right, and you can break that out into a variety of different ways, but doing it within first party data, you can do it on obviously cost per acquisition basis and customer lifetime value that are functions of sales volume, sales velocity. I think there's also a high level impact to understand efficiencies that you gain, right? As Alvin said, your media targeting, and I think you had it on the stat there too, Amy, your media targeting can be much more efficient, right? Because you don't have waste. And then I think there's also an element of brand affinity, brand advocacy. So because you have that relationship, because in many cases you're going direct, you can build a brand in a way that you couldn't otherwise do.
Christine?
Yeah, data everywhere. I totally agree with you, Michael. I would say measure what matters both to your business and then what is your goal with that campaign. Retailers are a powerful in in more closely connecting business goals than some of the other, like to your point, Michael, around efficiency and less waste. I would say, common measurement that we see or metrics that we see that really help drive the right lens against business objectives would be household penetration, sales lift, incremental units. Don't rely on kind of the standard media metrics. Push for some of those big business objective metrics.
Love that. And sometimes I find sitting on the agency side, as long as I have it, it's tough to set those goals, right? It's hard to pinpoint that answer because of the data, because there are so many ways to measure it, because of the nomenclature and how we think about metrics as a whole. So thank you. Ricky, how about for you?
Building on what Christine said, data, there's lots of it, and finding the signal amidst the noise of what are the right metrics that matter and what are the limiting that number, right? To be very focused on your objectives. So for us, it kind of tying them back to our specific priorities. So if we've got a growth priority, how are we delivering against that in quantity or in kind of quality in terms of activation rates? So tying very specific KPIs around growth, similar to engagement and retention. This is a long-term relationship, as Michael said. And so how are we doing on that engagement in a kind of ongoing basis, but then over time? How do consumers interact with us? How long are they staying active with us? Kind of what does that relationship look like? What do they want that relationship to look like? You can only have so many CPG pickle jar relationships, to use the analogy from earlier. Michael, maybe perhaps different, able to have lots of those relationships. And then activation metrics, we talked about, how you're using this first party data. So yes, you may be sending emails, but how else are you generating value from that? Be that through media activation, through partnerships, through insights, and kind of really understanding what the value drivers are behind that, and then how you're going to track against usage of that in those different functions or use cases.
Great. Alvin, how about for you?
Yeah, so everyone pretty much covered on the basics, right? So I'm gonna try to take it down a little bit more tactical. So when you think about it, the problem is, as marketers, we like one thing to focus on, right? This is the number you should be optimizing towards, which is, for me, is a myopic view. You have to take a step back and say, okay, what is like Ricky and everyone says, the business objectives? And then from a program standpoint, what are their objectives? So the way we like to think about it, we break it out in two categories. So we like to think about it as far as in-process metrics, right? In process, which focuses on the user, the journey, and the stage that they're in. What is the role of those programs? and then the business metrics and how that ties back to it. So whether if it's protecting share, whether if it's household pin or purchase frequency, then we connect it too, because there's understanding, where the user is in their journey, and then how that ties back to the business. And the way we do that, we create a framework where we develop a measurement plan that outlines these things that ties back to the activation of the program. So there is no common metric, but if we have to simplify it, really the way we think about it in these two different categories, in process, which focuses on the user, the program, and what we're trying to get them to do, and then how that ties to the business impact, which are the business metrics.
Yeah, another way to think about what Alvin is saying, right, is the leading and lagging metrics and indicators of things, right? I would say the majority of CPG brands we work with are saying, well, what's happening with volume and what's happening with share, right? I want to know what's happening with those. And we can have a great program offering. We just did a great summer grilling program with a variety of vendors at IGA, and the consumer engagement went through the roof. We had like 7x this year involvement in that program, which is just wild.
Right.
But at the end of the day, and we saw volume go up, but at the end of the day, share could have gone down, right? Because maybe they weren't growing as fast as their competition in terms of sales. So I think volume and share are key metrics that everything's going to, in some cases, tie back to. But to Alvin's point, what are those factors that are going to drive share, and within that, right? So in the case of retail, it could be cases on display, it could be number of displays, et cetera. So within the world of CRM, data-driven marketing, right? What are those factors that get you close to volume, right? How do you get as close to the cash register as possible? And then what are those other things? So you might say, as Ricky said, email, right? You know, if nobody opens it, you're not going to build that relationship, right? So email opens are important. Are they as important as clicks to a website and purchases? Of course not. But there are certain things that you need to focus on in terms of what's happening today that I know I can make a difference on, and then what's going to lag that in terms of share or other things.
Yeah, ultimately it is about how many jars of pickles we actually sell.
Right. Or eat.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. So now I'm going to completely switch gears, and I'm going to switch us to the retailer's perspective. So from a retailer's perspective, how can they effectively collaborate with CPG brands to leverage first-party data and their CRM programs for mutual success in driving sales and customer satisfaction? Christine, from a Kroger perspective, why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah. Retail media is popular today because, it works for brands and shoppers.
Yeah.
That is core, I think, to everything that we're talking about today, which is relationship building with consumers directly. Application of sales data from loyalty programs to deliver relevant and engaging messages to audiences drive better measurement, and therefore you can kind of slice and dice things differently to find out, like your point, Alvin and Michael, right, which is the lead and lag measures. That's where it's a space where you can kind of test and learn and play with different things so that you can ultimately continue to drive that relationship with your customer. Relevant audiences are really critical to that too. And that goes back to the testing and learning and figuring those things out. For us, Kroger can deliver the same sales impact of traditional digital media with 51% fewer impressions. That, drives less waste and also more relevant and hopefully personalized messages with audiences. It's super important that we're really thinking about the shopper and the end experience for a person at the end of all of that. And I think in partnership with a CPG brand, we're able to do that pretty effectively.
Right. Alvin?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, right? So when you think about it, it all boils down to data ownership. Who owns the data? Retailer does. And it all boils down to sell through and moving units. And it's mutually beneficial. As a brand, if you're moving more units from a sell-through perspective, you're then able to, obviously increase your share, and as a retailer, you make more money, right? So from a co-op standpoint, data co-op, the more I know about who's buying my product, the more we can then develop product that meets their needs. So we've seen Clean Room come about, where there's data co-op that's happening there from a partnership standpoint. So that's one aspect. The other aspect we talked about is around activation or point of sale couponing. One of the biggest challenges in CPG is the offers. Because of clearinghouse paper, you have to take this paper, you got to take it in. We're in 2023. I don't even know if I have a paper coupon. Like, seriously, right? Everything is on the phone. So you can't take a phone to a store from a coupon from, let's say, International Delight, and then you scan it at any retailer. You have to take a paper because of the fragmentation in space. So creating a solution like universal mobile coupon, like DTC, where you can then activate across the board, it's mutually beneficial because it boils down to sell through, moving units. So that is one area we've been, driving some innovation for some of the brands that we've worked with. As I mentioned, Mucinex there. And I think it's more retailers should think about how they can partner with their manufacturer to drive, a point of sale transaction and data co-op.
Ricky, how about from your perspective?
It starts with joint business planning and aligning on what are those shared goals and desired outcomes with our retailer partners. From there, once you've aligned on that, then you can start to figure out, where does first party data, CRM, retail media, where do those start to play in to support those objectives, and build the plan and what success looks like. And so I think we kind of building that foundation, as Alvin mentioned, our first party data looks different than a retailer's first party data. And so we've got to kind of understand what we want to do with that in terms of sharing. Is it using clean rooms to help measure campaign effectiveness between the two different audiences in a privacy compliant fashion? Or is it leveraging our data to talk to our consumers to be able to support a retailer specific objective, and how and if that fits into larger brand CRM goals and strategies? But also scale, right? When we think about our database and the people that we have in there, do we have the right scale to be able to move the needle? Do we have the relevant first party data attributes to know where consumers shop, so that when we send them an email supporting an initiative, that they actually shop there, so that personalized content feels relevant, as opposed to, well, I don't shop there, why are you sending me this offer? And so making sure that once you've aligned on the objectives, that then the execution, the strategies kind of flow from that, and that you have the capabilities in place to be able to reach your objectives in the end, and then measuring it all the way through the process, right? It's one thing to go put it out into the marketplace. It's another to then understand its impact and how you can learn from that, and how you could apply that in other opportunities moving forward, or why maybe the learning was not to pursue for future opportunities.
Michael?
Yeah, I'll take it a little bit differently in terms of getting back to the question of how we can partner. And I think the joint business planning, as Ricky said, it is critical, but within that, it's about thinking strategically, of understanding, here's the objective, and now first party data, CRM, give us the tools to attack that objective differently with multiple strategies. And as talked about household penetration, we talked about occasion-based usage, et cetera. So if my objective is to grow during this seasonal period, right, I'm going to have a different conversation with Christine. I'm going to have a different conversation with Alvin, a different conversation with you, Amy. Amy, you might need the $1 off coupon. Alvin might just need to be reminded Christine might need to be inspired with a recipe, or maybe how to clean up for a recipe with some of Ricky's products, right? And so being more strategic about the dialogue you have because of the people you know and the people that you have relationships with is probably the best way to collaborate. So I know Christine and the fine folks over Kroger Precision Marketing don't say, oh, you want to do this? Here's your campaign done, right? It's a collaborative process where they sit down and say, we have these different audiences. Don't even talk to this one. Talk to this one in this manner. This one might need 5 touches. This one might be an offer, etc. So it's about being more expansive in terms of how you reach that objective.
Yeah, this portion of the conversation, I get very excited when we start talking about the data and the utilization between this and AI. Like we could spend another 6 hours digging into this. So selfishly, I'm going to switch us a little bit, and we're going to start talking about data and security and what that means. A study conducted by YouGov, 79% of the consumers worldwide are nervous about the security of their digital data. Not surprising. So question, Christine, we're going to start with you again. How can CPG brands ensure that the data privacy and compliance while leveraging first-party data for personalized marketing and consumer experiences? So consumers give us a lot of information. How do we ensure their security? How do we keep them safe?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to really putting the shopper at the core of everything that you're doing. And transparency is really key. In this kind of legacy digital media ecosystem, we have to, I think the opportunity is to really showcase and make sure that you are transparent in how you are safeguarding the trust that your shoppers have put into you. At Kroger, we empower and encourage our customers to make informed choices. You can provide clear information about ways that customers can opt in and ways that they can opt out of personalized advertising. We are very proud of the fact that our customers tend to opt in because they enjoy earning those personalized offers and the fuel points. It is a true value exchange there. And making their shopping easier is like really core to how we set those programs up. And as a result, 96% of Kroger sales are tied to our loyalty card programs. And that's fantastic. And we take that we do not take that for granted. We take that very seriously in terms of guarding that data and the consumer privacy, if you will.
Right. It's an impressive stat. Michael?
Yeah, I think the old term trust but verify, right?
Yeah.
How do you get the data? How often is the data refreshed? How do you use the data? What compliance processes are in place to ensure data privacy? And as Christine said, opt in, opt out, et cetera. What are your policies? So I think underneath all this, don't assume that your policies and the way your company operates is the same as your partners when you're sharing data. And so it came up a couple times around data clean rooms and stuff like that, ensuring that your data privacy policy is not being you're in compliance with it, whether you're doing stuff internally or with partners. It's key to make sure that you're having that conversation before engaging in a relationship with, as you said today, anyone, because you're constantly sharing data, you're constantly asking questions, pulling data, et cetera. And if you're in violation because somebody else is in violation or because one of their vendors is in violation, it doesn't matter at the end of the day to the consumer, shopper, or regulators.
Yeah, that's great. Alvin?
Yeah, so to piggyback on that, what Michael and Christine just mentioned. So a few years ago, I wrote a research paper that focused on IoT-enabled marketing, really looking at the marketing literature and trying to understand privacy, trying to understand consumer concerns around that, and how can an organization be effective, right? So it boils down to a few things. So we talk about transparency. Christine talked about that. We talk about control. And control in the aspect of, as a consumer, you want to have control over what I share with you and what you send back to me, right? I need to have a shade in that. The other aspect is around value exchange. Christine talked about that, right? So if there is a perceived value from the consumer end, then trust concerns goes down, right? And trust obviously is heightened when any of that is broken. You're collecting information that I have no control over, and there's no value exchange. I'm only doing it from my perspective. A lot of time brands is transactional. It's not about building, connection and relationship on both sides. So from a technology standpoint, what are the enabler that allows brands or CPG organization to operate in this IoT or connected world? Consent management. So there are technology around that. Preference center. If I say, don't talk to me on my mobile, do not send me a text message, right? If I said, don't send me a push notification, do not send me a push notification. So that's one aspect of it, right? So preference center and consent management. The other side of it is around the ability to opt out, right? Of communication, right? If I want to get all my data, I can. And then when you look at it in terms of the trust aspect of it, we talk about clean room has become an aspect of it where you can learn a lot more about the consumer data co-op, and then that heighten your value exchange. Your communication is not purely transactional. So those are some mechanisms from a technology standpoint that allows CPG brands to, operate or create an effective data-driven or a connected marketing strategy that focuses on the consumer with those things in mind, which is transparency, control around value exchange.
Thank you. Ricky?
Close partnership with legal and compliance. So that has been kind of, a very important part of this role, and being able to build those relationships and maintain them so that they understand what our vision and our strategies are when it comes to first party data. But so that I can also understand the landscape that's changing so quickly out there around. And so we're kind of having that, not just it's not a once a year, can you look over this email exchange, but really having that relationship to be able to say when new opportunities develop, new partnerships, whatever those may be, let's have a conversation. Let's understand the risk, the benefits, really the opportunity that is there. And that then opens up the opportunity long-term to be able to really explore the space and take advantage of it in a way that kind of maintains that data privacy and compliance. It's a tough field to kind of navigate. And so relying on our experts internally to be able to help us go do that.
I think it's a great point, Ricky, because as you said early on, it's a CRM or whatever we want to call this thing. Relationship building is a long-term thing. You screw it up, it goes away very, very quickly. So ensuring that you're not doing something that you thought was right that isn't is important. Obviously, we'll take ransomware, data leaks, and all aside. But if a brand does something wrong, typically consumers react very, very quickly, and that unsubscribe or that phone call or whatever worst case you can imagine happens very quickly. So good point.
It is a very delicate dance. So as we think about all of the data that we're given, all of the opportunities to speak to our consumers from so many different lenses, so many different areas, I'm going to move this into how can CPG brands take that first party data and their CRM programs and make them seamlessly work across marketing channels to create that unified customer experience, keeping in mind it is a very delicate dance, and too much can turn a consumer off, too little make them forget you and run to another brand. So Ricky, I'm going to go right back to you. Kick us off for this one.
I think the easiest place to start in most people's minds is I've got to get the tech stack figured out to be able to move the data around and to talk. But I think it needs to, before you can go there, you first have to start with the vision and the value creation potential. Are you solving a problem in your current consumer experience, or do you have an opportunity to enhance it? Like really understanding that. And if this, once you have that vision, is it a shared vision with the teams who own all those other channels, right? So maybe it's the case that one team owns all of those different channels and they're kind of working together, but odds are there's going to be different partners internally and potentially externally with agency partners that you are collaborating with to be able to bring this to life. And so you've got to be having that shared vision, the same KPIs and outcomes that you're striving towards, because that integrated teamwork that you're going to build upon is what's going to lay the foundation to then go have the tech stack conversation, to then figure out what you may need to be able to go do to execute that data in the marketplace, right? Whether that's connecting CRM with a CMS or with your ad tech or any other kind of platforms that you may have where you want to be able to move that first party data in a compliant fashion, as well as being able to really kind of bring in the signals and then activate against those signals in a different platform. To the example that was used earlier about the SMS, do you want an SMS? Do you not want an SMS? Do you want an email? Do you not want an email? Or you open the email, you didn't respond there, or maybe you've expressed interest in SMS, so then I'll send you an email, or I'll try a different channel to see if I can get a different response based on what happened in one. You've got to link all that together. But first you need to tie it back to what's the goal in doing all of that, and then start talking about the tech.
It's a great point. Alvin?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on what Ricky was saying, it all starts with what are the business objectives, and then understanding, the application or the activation against those objectives. So at a foundation level, obviously you got to have the right technology in place. So whether if it's a CRM solution, if you're doing first party data acquisition, so you have data on engagement, or you're running a CTV or heavy in media, then you can leverage that first party data to create seed audiences for activation, find new partner, new customer that way, or you can reactivate those customer within your media channel, right? So that's one element of it. Obviously, that's the crawl component, and then over the last few years, it's been about CDP and CDP and CDP, and everybody is a CDP, and every platform you can think about is a CDP. No one knows how to use it, but that's the vision, right? So how do you connect all of that together to understand? Alvin Glade visited my website. I have a partnership with a retailer that's sending me transaction data. I can understand they're buying, and then how can I activate that against whether if it's email, is it SMS, or is it direct mail? So that's the vision. But the proof is in the pudding, as they say. It's around the activation. Michael talked about earlier, organization issues around data silos, compliance, and data ownership. Those are the roadblock that stops that from moving forward.
Christine?
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of both of you, Ricky and Alvin, I definitely think business objectives are core. If you don't know what you're trying to do, then let's start there. But then also think about yourself as a shopper, right? Like your experience in the world and with the world is dynamic, and it is not siloed to a single experience or a single store or website. You are dynamic. And I think that is really key in looking for ways that you can create more connected experiences. We fully believe that we're going to see more retailers follow our lead in terms of building trusted partnership and trusted bridges with other media platforms. Like streaming TV being an easy one to kind of bring forward. We really think that there is such an opportunity to create more of a seamless commerce experience beyond the walls of our own website, beyond just our on-site. And I think that's probably true for everyone on this call. And marketers have to think like that. We know that people are dynamic. They are looking for kind of a broader experience. And I think as you set up those strategies, be thinking about that, dynamic experience of the audience that you're reaching.
Right. Michael?
Yeah, I'm not going to piggyback. I'm going to go a slightly different direction and hope and state that we're beyond the days of more data for the sake of more data or more signups for the sake of more signups. Because you mentioned how to use the data seamlessly across channels. Well, if you have the right data, you're not using it seamlessly across all channels. You're using seamlessly across the right channels and with the right consumer, shopper, guest, customer, or whatever you want to call them. And so, especially early on, I think a lot of people were like, I want to get as many pieces of data as possible, right? So that's like me meeting Christine today and saying, hey, let's get married. Like, you don't know me from anyone, right? So you know me as the pickle guy. So why do we think if we collect more data, it'll solve itself? So back to, I think, original point from Ricky of like, what are we trying to do? Because the more data we collect, actually, the more issues we can create for ourselves, going back to that data privacy question. And to some extent, it can freak people out. Like, well, you're asking me to sign up for the program, great. You asked me for my mobile number, I get it. You asked me for my address, I get it. You're asking me for my shoe size. Like, why do you need my shoe size? You're asking me for the names of my 3 kids. Why do you need the name of my 3 kids? And so, I think the best sort of easy thing that I've heard about this is from Brandon Witcher at Forrester, who talks about being smart about the data that you collect, but be overt about the data that you're asking for and collecting, but be covert in terms of how you use it. That doesn't mean hiding it, but don't say, hey, day one, we asked you for your shoe size, and that's why we're coming back with a new partnership with this person on shoes, right? Like, that seems a little freaky. But I think you've got to be, smart about what you want to go accomplish. You've got to be smart about how you're going to go accomplish it, and you need to be smart about that relationship.
I like that. So I'm going to switch us to some audience questions because we have a lot coming through. And I am going to make these a bit of a jump ball. So whoever would like to jump in with an answer, please feel free to do so. This is a great one from Matt. Thank you, Matt. Do you see any alarming dramatic trends in behaviors or attitudes about personal data from the new generation of shoppers 18 to 30-ish? Who'd like to take that one? Somebody's got to jump to the ball.
I'll take it. I'll jump ball.
Thinking.
Yeah. I mean, I think alarming behaviors. I think in a gross oversimplification. At the same time, younger audiences are more open with their information, and they're also more protective of their information and perhaps less likely to have relationships. So we all see what's going on social media and TikTok and owned by Chinese, and that's dangerous. Nobody leaves, right? So I think it comes back down to the point Alvin said before. I think it was Alvin, about value creation and value exchange. If I'm getting value, I'm happy to give you my personal information. If I'm not, or if I'm not clear about the value I'm going to get from this exchange and this relationship, I'm not going to touch. So I think the younger generation, you have to be even more clear with and even more transparent with why and what you're going to use the data for and how you're going to use the data, because they understand more so than we all did growing up in terms of, well, what all this means and my data is everywhere, and I want to limit it unless you're very clear as to what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of that. So what I see, again, this is information that I've researched over the last couple of years, is that this idea of liquid and solid consumer. Solid is around loyalty. We're loyal to a particular brand and we're going to stick with that brand. And liquid, obviously, there's no such thing as loyalty. You just have to keep providing value to me, and then I'm going to transact with you. And what I've seen over the last few years is that loyalty is in essence going down, they're more likely to switch, right? So switching behavior, right? They're a lot more promiscuous, so to speak. So you have to work harder as a brand to maintain that connection and that value exchange. So any leakage in trust, value exchange, you're going to see a sharp declining loyalty. So that's the trend, which puts an emphasis on, it's not just a transactional relationship. It's about building brand attachment. It's about building connection, which has to do with love, trust, and respect, right? And you have to continue. That has to be center of your marketing.
Christine or Ricky? Yeah, good. Okay. I'm going to pop in one more from Brian. Thank you, Brian. I remember in the early days of DTC, retailers would penalize brands for going outside of the traditional retail ecosystem. As more brands increase D2C and have to remain relevant and competitive, are retailers sharing more first-party data now to strengthen their CPG relationships, or are they holding it even tighter to the chest and not sharing?
I think I'll take that first. I'd be curious your response here too, Michael. I think that really depends on the retailer. I feel like that's definitely something that can occur. I think that like leveraging the power of retail data is still important, regardless of how you're transacting and whether or not you're going more D2C. And there's ways to do both pretty effectively. I can't speak to personal experience on kind of penalizing, if you will, but I definitely think that there's still a world where both can coexist.
And I think, in my world, we work with, here in the US, some 2,000 independent retailers selling grocery items and more. And the beauty of that is that they have a strong local presence. They have a very strong connection with the shopper. But as we said before, even then, you can't expect that they're only shopping at my store. So the notion of penalizing or, doing something negative because of relationships that other manufacturers have with other retailers is kind of silly. And the key is, like we were talking about, CRM, you got to show value. And so if a CPG can bring data to our relationships and make it stronger and help our independent retailers sell more, bring it on.
Build on that to say the CPGs who are doing D2C well, they're not, the goal is learning, right? The learning more about the consumer, building the relationship, and it's not competing on, can I move as much volume as I might be able to move somewhere else, but identifying unique opportunities that may not work at scale, but may work in a smaller batch, that may work in a more limited run, or that may be a test that you want to pursue before taking it at a broader reach through a retail footprint. And so giving CPGs an opportunity to go learn in the marketplace without with different set of circumstances and constraints, but where you can leverage your CRM, your targeted database, to really go have that conversation with consumers to get that feedback early on. That's where I think there's opportunity rather than trying to compete on volume. That doesn't seem to really be the goal anymore on those. And so I think it is more geared towards a different outcome.
Right. So perfect timing. That brings us right to the end. So listen, as we wrap our time together, Christine, Michael, Ricky, Dr. Glay, thank you for your time and participation. You've shared expertise, perspectives, experiences, and you've enlightened us on CPG and how to approach everything the best.
This was The Edge Lab. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe and stay with us as we keep pushing the boundaries of marketing innovation. Until next time.